So I know that Koyenskaya is still a couple of months away for us over here on the NA version of the game, but with how things are going to be getting crazy with Lost Belt 6 dropping on NA and the Ordeal Call going to be hitting the JP version of the game, I don't want a video like this to kind of teach my NA players how Buster farming works to get lost in the weeds, because I know there's going to be a lot of people that either don't remember how the Buster farming works, or they're new to the game and they have no idea what this double Koyenskaya system entails, and I want to make sure that I have a guide out there for those people, because again, it has been 2 years since she's released. So in the background, I'm going to be showing some different setups that you can use with the double Koyenskaya plus Oberon, and I might throw a waiver in there, because there are some different setups you can do, because Koyenskaya ideally wants to be paired with Buster AoE servants that have a 30 to 50% battery, and there's a few different ways you can kind of get along in doing this system. So I guess the first thing to go over is that this is kind of a high investment type of farming, because you do need 2 limited 5-star servants. You do need Koyenskaya to actually make it work. You need that skill that reduces skill cooldown, otherwise you're not Buster farming. Like, there's no other way, there's like no other easy way to slice it. If you do not have Koyenskaya, you cannot do this type of Buster farming. Oberon is very good for Buster farming. He's what allows you to do, say, the 30% battery setups, and he's also what allows you to clear some of those very high damaging nodes, those like 1 million HP free quests that we've been getting on JP. You really do want Oberon for that, because he makes that a lot easier. But if you're using, say, a 50% battery AoE Buster servant, you can make do with someone else that can give you 50%. It could be the free waiver that you're going to get during Anniversary, it could be a Castoria, it could be a Scotty. Because here's generally how it breaks down. You could have your Buster AoE servant with their 50% battery with literally any 50% starting charge CE. I'm using this as the example because this is what a lot of players are going to have. I mean, there's even going to be the aerial drive, the Martha Summer CE, that gives you Buster damage and NP damage and starts you off at 50%. That's going to be coming back to the shop. And it's very good if you just do not have anything else. It will definitely get the job done. The NP damage buff there is actually boosted by Oberon's 3rd skill, because that's how Black Grail interacts with it as well. And so I'm going to use this as the example. So you start off with wave 1. You have your 50% starting from your CE. You have your 50% battery. You're going to go ahead and pop that. You're going to clear wave 1. Keep in mind, you can use your Koyenskaya's 2nd and 3rd skill on wave 1. That's perfectly fine. Those are basically just your damage skills. The one you want to save is the 1st skill for the 2nd wave. Individually, each of these give you a 50% battery, so with both Koyenskayas, you will get back up to 100% to use it to clear the 2nd wave. But the most important thing is that both of these skills reduce your skill cooldown by 2, and because most of the 50% battery skills are on a 6-turn cooldown, that's going to reduce that by 4. You already used it the first turn, so you've already got 1 turn of cooldown down, and then after this will be the last turn, and so going into wave 3, you will have your battery back. This is when you will then plug suit into your waiver, your Oberon, whoever can give you 50%, because your 50% battery that has now come off cooldown, plus whatever other 50% will be enough for you to clear the last node. That's why I was saying you can use someone like Castor. You can use Scotty if you don't have anybody else, right? They'll still provide an attack buff or a defense down in Scotty's case, and they'll still be able to give you that last 50% that you need to get the node done. But ideally, you want to be using Oberon, because Oberon gives you a lot more power and a very strong Buster buff. He gives you an NP damage buff and will raise the effectiveness of your NP damage buffs, and make them hit a lot harder. That's how you start doing like a million bajillion damage, especially if you're using him with something like Black Grail. But that's typically for servants that have like a 100% battery, people like Arcoid or Melusine, people like that. You also want to keep in mind that you can re-loop your offensive skills sometimes. If your offensive skills are on a low enough cooldown, and you pop them on the first turn as well, they actually might come off cooldown as well for the 3rd wave. So it makes it really easy to, say, double stack your buffs, plus getting the extra buffs from plug suiting in the last support, ideally, again, Oberon. And it makes it very easy for your Buster team comps to push through nodes. Now, I did mention at the beginning that you can do this with 30%, and you might be asking, well, if we have a 30% battery, how are we going to clear this? Well, for one, you can still do it with the 50% starting charge CE, you just need to max out your append skill, so that way you technically start out at 70%, plus your 30% will bring you up to 100% for wave 1, but then when it comes to wave 3, you might be asking, well, I have my 30% battery, where am I getting the extra 70%? And again, that's where Oberon is ideal, because between his first and second skill, he gives you 70% NP. And so that'll allow you to fire your NP even if you have a 30% battery only. Again, you can also use things like Imaginary Element if you don't want to max out your append skill. As long as you can fire that NP on the first wave, you should be fine. The reason I'm also bringing up 50% starting charge CEs is that is most event CEs as well. And so it gives Buster farming that little bit of flexibility, very similar to, say, Arts farming, right? Where they can pretty much use most event CEs and do a full CE setup, which is, again, very nice for making your farming a lot easier. One thing you should probably consider, though, is that your team cost is going to be a bit ridiculous because you're already investing at least 2 5-star servants in Koyenskaya and Oberon, so do at least keep that in mind. That if your DPS is also going to be someone like, say, Arjuna Alter, Morgan, even someone like Lancer Artoria, a 5-star servant, you're going to be really eating up team cost, especially if you're doing, say, a gold currency run, or it's a lotto where the lotto CE is a 5-star CE. So do keep in mind, you might have to put MASH in the back line to make sure you can run the full CE setup. Now you may be asking, well, what about some of the other guys? What about a 20% battery? Can my Karna do it? And unfortunately, no. 30% is the limit to how far down you can go before you can actually do Buster farming, because if you walk through it, even if you give your 20% or 25% in the case of, say, Karna or Arjuna, a maximum broken K-scope, they will fire their NP on turn 1, easy, free of charge. Koyenskaya will give them 100% for the second wave. You then plug suit in Oberon for wave 3, you get your 70%, and oh no, you only have 25%, you're literally going to be 5% off, unless that 20% battery servant specifically also has a skill that gives them NP every single turn. They're just going to be shy. Which is why in a lot of my reviews for Buster AoE servants, I see some people in the comments not really get why I say it's a shaft when Buster AoE servants don't get a 30% battery at the bare minimum, because it cuts them off completely from being able to do Buster farming. Now, again, you can try to circumvent this. Let's say you want to use like an Arash for wave 1, and you could still technically use your 20%, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, Arash cleared wave 1, and then I had my maximum broken scope for wave 2, and then the Koyenskaya has covered me for wave 3. At that point, are you really doing Buster farming because you're having to use an Arash to take up a slot that could be for one of your other supports, or someone else holding an event CE, when he's most likely in this scenario going to be holding something like an Imaginary Element and is not benefiting you in this farming node. So at that point, you're not really Buster farming. At that point, you're really just coping. Now, what are the benefits for doing Buster farming, right? We talked about all this, we threw some numbers around. Yeah, we can only use 30 to 50% battery, guys, but what's the point? Well, I did a video on this kind of in a similar vein a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about what card type is right for you, and in that video I kind of break down why Buster farming is the best thing you can be doing right now once Koyenskaya comes out. Because quick farming is very straightforward, but unfortunately, it doesn't really have a lot of flexibility. If you're not going up against a 3-3-3 node exactly, where you're fighting 3 enemies, 3 enemies, 3 enemies, those quick servants are going to really struggle to loop their NP because they just don't have the same looping power as art servants, where in your art setups, you might be able to get away with like a 3 enemy, 2 enemy, 3 enemy setup because they have just higher NP gain, and Castoria just gives them so much raw NP that they might be able to get away with it, but the thing that they're lacking is just raw damage. Once we started getting those 1 million nodes on the JP version of the game, it became clear that you could do it with art setups, but it was either going to require a very high investment, I'm talking like NP3, NP4, NP5 servants, or it was going to be event by event basis, right? Where you could do it on some events because you happen to have someone who is event damage bonus, or you had a really good damage mod, but you wouldn't be able to consistently do it every single event, which is where Buster farming came in. Because they don't actually loop their NP, it's just raw globs of NP being injected into your main DPS. They don't care about the node setup. It could be a 1-1-1 node and it doesn't matter to them because all they care about is clearing with enough damage, which is not really a problem for most of your Buster servants. They're some of the hardest hitting units in the game, and you have access to like Arjuna Alter as a farmer, which is ridiculous. Which I guess the point that I'm going for is that Buster farming was very consistent. You're not reliant on getting overkill or refund to a certain point. It's not like, oh man, I really hope I refund exactly 49% NP so my 50% battery on Space Ishtar or Summer Ibuki will be enough for me to farm the last node. You always know exactly how much NP you're going to be getting every single turn. The only variance is really the NP damage, and that's why people with, like, say, Arcueid, when she released for last year's anniversary, paired her with Black Grail so that the NP damage variance really wasn't a thing, which I haven't really gone over Black Grail too much in this video. I know some people are probably clamoring in the comments right now. Again, I went over the 50% battery version for Buster farming because that's probably going to be the most common one that everybody's going to do. Even new players are going to have access to 50% starting charge CEs, and 50% starting charge CEs are going to be very standard for events, and you're probably going to use those to do like full CE setups. But again, they get even better if you can incorporate Black Grail into your setup, because Oberon's third skill does buff the damage buff of Black Grail, allowing these Buster comps to quite easily and casually destroy a lot of these very high HP nodes, and it just becomes the most consistent way to farm. It is very high investment, but it is the best thing you can be doing. And as much of like a Morgan simp that I am, if you want to have a very easy time moving forward on the NA version, I would put all of your resources, if you can't go for every banner, into Koyenskaya and Oberon, because you'll thank me like in about a year when we start getting these ridiculous nodes that start having just massive amounts of HP. And instead of trying to do Einstein level math, trying to calculate how you're going to actually clear some of these nodes, you can just bring your favorite Buster servant and they'll just absolutely annihilate it. Again, that's only advice for people that just cannot go for every single banner that's coming out here. I know that, like, it's just a murderer's row of really good banners. You have Morgan, you have Melusine, you have Koyenskaya, you have Oberon, you have all of these crazy servants back to back to back. Then you have Summer right after that as well, which has a ton of servants that people are looking forward to, like Avenger Kama or the Saber Okita Altar. So if you have to go for only one servant, you go for Koyenskaya, because you can't do Buster farming without Koyenskaya. She's the whole reason that works. If you don't have double Koyenskaya, you are not Buster farming. You've now regressed back to year 1 FGO, where you're just clicking NPs and hoping for the best. If you can afford to go for a second servant, you go for Oberon, and then after that you can go for people like Morgan, who can be used with the Buster farming setups. Does pretty well because she's a Berserker that has triple damage mods. You can go for Melusine, she has 100% battery, very flexible, very easy to use in those setups. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I know this was like a tutorial for Buster farming, but I also wanted it to be a discussion of like why it's so good and why it's such a big deal and why people are so excited for it. Because it just makes your life a lot easier. Plus, it kind of brings Buster onto the same level as Quick and Arts, where you're really only doing Quick and Arts farming on NA right now. Buster farming is not really a real thing, but once Koyenskaya comes out, you can use any card type you want to farm any node, with some asterisks here and there. Again, Quick can't really do everything. Sometimes Arts might not have enough damage, but Buster will always be eternal. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, late guys.